welcome to the SquaMates podcast. This is a very serious podcast about reptiles and amphibians, where the language is strong and the jargon is stronger. My name is Dr. Mark T. Schertz. I am a herpetologist and an evolutionary biologist, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Ethan Kosak.
Hey, I'm Ethan Kosak. I'm a cartoonist and general layabout.
And Gabriel Ughetto.
And I'm Gabriel Ughetto, and I'm a paleo artist, scientific illustrator, and I used to work in herpetology, but not anymore.
And we are joined this episode by a guest host, Hiral Naik.
Hi everyone, I'm a snake ecologist from South Africa.
So, Hiral is going to be joining us as a guest host on this episode, and at the end of the episode, we'll be having an interview with her, her and Gabriel and me, and where we talk about her background, how she got into herpetology, and all of the exciting things that have happened, and some of her cool research and what she's working on right now. Very comprehensive.
On a super cool group of snakes.
Very cool group of snakes. The Lamprophiidae. More on that at the end of the episode. So, dear listeners, hello and welcome back. We are going to dive right in, I think, to talking about some pretty awesome recent research that has just been published. There's some exciting new things. Perhaps let's start off with talking about the new global phylogeny of the turtles. So this is a paper that was published in PNAS for those of us with an infantile sense of humor.
Every time.
The title of the paper, so this is by Robert C. Thompson and colleagues. The title of the paper is A Global Phylogeny of Turtles Reveals a Burst of Climate-Associated Diversification on Continental Margins. And this paper is kind of long awaited by those of us who are interested in turtles, because the availability of turtle phylogenetics has been pretty substandard, let's say, until now, especially in comparison to the SquaMates, for instance, where we've had a very good sampling of a lot of the different organisms, or of a lot of the different groups. The phylogeny of turtles has been really lacking. And it's kind of important because I don't know if the general public is aware of this, but turtles as a group turtles and tortoises have repeatedly transitioned into the aquatic niche. So, it's not that all of the swimming turtles are necessarily one single clade of swimming turtles, but rather they have moved into and out of aquatic habits a lot. And this kind of study, not only does it give us a little bit of information on, the actual biogeographic origins of the group, but it's also really important for our understanding of when did the turtles become, marine, when did they become aquatic in their various different instances, and where do the tortoises sit in the tree of life here. So the study is, it has as its centerpiece one figure spread over 2 pages that is the phylogeny of the tree. And I think one of the most interesting things from my perspective, bearing in mind that I know shit all about the paleo history of turtles, is that the tortoises are deeply nested within the tree here. So the Testudinidae, which are the tortoises, are sister to the geoemids. People might know geoemids because I believe the painted turtle is a geoemid. And are very far down the tree. And some of the deepest branches within the turtles, the deepest branch of extant turtles, are the Pleurodires, which are the side-necked turtles. Include the side-necked turtles. There's also the Podocnemids, which are the big-headed turtles that are found in South America and Madagascar. So
big-headed. Those are the river turtles, right?
Yeah, big-headed river turtles, I think they're called. I don't really know the
Talk about crappy common names.
That's another one that used to be really common, if I'm remembering right. It's
By
another
the
one
way,
that used to be really common in the hobby.
No,
if you've
the
ever seen a
big-headed turtles are
Podocnemis, you would know that it doesn't have a
endangered.
big head.
Yeah.
So
Sorry?
that's a very bad common name.
Which is a bad name?
If you've ever seen a Podocnemis, you would know that it doesn't have a big head. On the contrary, they have quite small heads. So it's
the
really
Malagasy
bad.
species has a very big head. I think that's.
But
where
I'm talking about Podocnemis, which is
Yeah.
the basis of the family.
Yeah, Podocnemid, like the what's it called? Erimnoshellis.
But I'm talking about Podocnemis, the genus.
So I see.
Yeah.
We should say we were just griping about common names before we started recording.
Yes.
Because I was talking about how I think pink-tongued skink is the dumbest possible common name ever, because all skinks are pink-tongued skinks except for blue-tongued skinks.
Well, I mean, some skinks have like a black tip to their tongue, but yes, in general, it's not smart to name a group or name a species after
it
a
should just
common
be called a
trait.
normal-tongued skink.
Yes. Anyway, this paper is really cool. Of course, it goes into all kinds of different things about the biogeographic history of the group, but I think the most important thing, the thing for which this paper is likely to be cited highest, is the fact that it gives us a robust phylogeny of the base, of all of the turtles and tortoises, which is
So I don't remember what the phylogenetic hypothesis, clearly was about before this paper, but it seems to me that a lot of this is similar to what we already knew, right? Like
Probably.
The split between Pleurodira and Cryptodira in the late Triassic, early Jurassic kind of thing, kind of seems correct to me, like something I remember. And also the fact that Pleurodirans are kind of like a, the early divergent branch seems to be,
Yeah.
Are they still archosaurs?
They were never. By the way, they were never archosaurs. They were closer to archosaurs than Lepidosauromorphs, but they were never within Archosauria. They were considered archosauromorphs, probably.
Oh, okay.
But
My
nobody
bad.
knows.
That we still don't really know where they fit.
No.
Yeah.
Which is that's actually kind of astonishing when you think about it. Like, there's a whole branch of reptiles that we just were like,
Yeah, in many ways, there are many groups for which this is true, but not so many diverse modern, many groups that have diverse modern diversity, great modern diversity, in which that's true, right? So, figuring out what the relationship is between the archosaurs, so the birds and crocodilians, right, and the and the dinosaurs, of course, and turtles and tortoises, plus the Lepidosauria, has been a serious source of uncertainty, and that problem does not seem to be going away at the moment.
There is a lot of conflict between morphological and molecular data. And,
Right.
and a big part, the molecular result is not super strong, and the big part of it is that people have to remember that we're missing a lot of taxa that are extinct that we cannot sample. So there is
they're highly derived pterosaurs. Calling it now.
No, but I'm going to say something, and this will put things in perspective. So the earliest example of a turtle relative is an animal from the Permian that just recently, there was this paper published, I think a couple of months ago, that proposes that animal is not really a reptile but a synapsid. So you can take that into consideration when you think about what we know about turtle evolution.
That's still not as extreme as the chameleon fossil that turned out to be an albinerpetontid amphibian, which
Oh yeah, which we've covered before.
we have covered it before. As a little bit of a paleontological whoopsie that is going to be a long-term problem, I think, for
well, that's also like the dinosaur bird lizard head.
Oculodentavis.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a topic for another day and another episode. I think, I don't remember
So,
what episode that is. I don't even know what episode this is, guys. We're not the Common Descent podcast. We can't do that. So,
I wasn't about to say
we
that.
have talked about oculodentavis in a previous episode. Go find it. You can listen through the others as you search. It's good fun. SquaMatespod.com.
What do you think about this paper, Mark? Going back to it to see if we could go on a super long tangent. What do you think about this paper? What part of this paper do you think is the most newsworthy or important to highlight?
Well, I mean, having a robust and dated phylogeny of all the turtles is something that really has, what do they say? They have 98% of the genera of all turtles. That's huge. I mean, that puts us at a much better perspective in terms of figuring out the evolution of the turtles. I like to think of trees, of papers that are centered around trees like this, not only in terms of the knowledge that they add, but they're a huge resource. I think, Hiral, you have some experience with this as well, right? Using the snake phylogeny and trying to analyze things on it, right?
Yeah, having a correctly dated phylogeny is so helpful in terms of getting all the ecological data that you need that follows on.
Right.
So if you have a good foundation, then the rest kind of follows through.
This is an entire domain, essentially. One of my very favorite researchers, or in terms of the way that he, the software that he's developing and the way that he interacts with the general research community, is Liam Revel. He wrote PhyTools, the R package, and that is an invaluable tool for all kinds of the analysis that we do in terms of the comparative method and doing comparative phylogenetic analysis. And it is designed to take trees like this one and then do all kinds of very cool statistics, figuring out where did the traits come from, how have the different groups evolved, and what can we say from those data sets. So, yeah, I would say that is the number one thing that stuck out to me, because one of my colleagues sent this paper to me by email and said, this is fantastic. We have now a good tree that we can actually use for understanding this group. And I think, Gabriel, you've already highlighted one of the big missing points. Well, you and Ethan have highlighted this missing point of we still don't know where the stupid turtles fit within the bigger reptilian tree, right? But having this piece of the puzzle completed allows us to go a little bit higher. And it's a relief to see that the gap at the base of this tree, well, it's hard to say based on the dated phylogeny like this, but the time between the branches at the base of the tree of the turtles here is between, I would say, 175 and 225 million years. Like, that's the length, the depth of the gap between the split between cryptodires and pleurodires, and the first split within the cryptodires.
Yeah, so late Triassic, early Jurassic.
Exactly. And having a gap of that size, that amount of time in there, means that we have a relatively decent chance of being able to resolve those basal nodes. And that's important if we want to go and figure out the actual evolution of these groups. That means we can have some confidence in the fact that that's actually the correct branch. It would be more useful, of course, to not have this in terms of evolutionary time, but in terms of coalescent time for figuring that out precisely. But it looks good to me. I also just think it's so cool to see some of these groups in context. I mean, speaking as someone who hadn't spent a lot of time looking at the turtle phylogeny before looking at this paper, realizing that the terrestrial tortoises are really an aberrant group within a group of otherwise semi-aquatic and fully aquatic turtles is so bizarre. Gabriel, I have a question for you. Where in the tree would our good friend Archelon fit?
Well,
which we all know is your favorite extinct turtle.
I was about to say, you guys know that I'm not a huge fan of turtles in general. I am not sure, actually.
It's because they keep their secrets within their shells. Sneaky bastards.
I think they're called Protostegids, the group that Archelon is done. I might be very wrong, but I think that's what they're called, and I'm not sure exactly where in the tree they would fit. I don't know how related to other sea turtles they are. I don't think they're that closely related.
It would surprise me, given like the shape of their plastron and stuff. But I also, do you know what era they're from?
You get the Archelon?
Yeah.
Cretaceous. Yeah, late Cretaceous.
Cretaceous. Okay.
Late Cretaceous.
Late Cretaceous. Okay. Well, yeah, that puts them roughly in the range of. There's a possibility that they would be related to the sea turtles or sister to all of the extant sea turtles.
I can tell you in a minute. They are. According to this, they are in a group that they're in a group called Panchelonoidea, which is sort of related to Chelonoidea, which includes chelonids and dermochelids. So they are distantly related to other sea turtles.
Cool. Okay, again, what learned, and so we can move on from that interesting paper to talk about some other four-legged friends, which are the skinks. So there was a paper that was published. It has, I don't know, 100 authors. It's a lot of authors. It's not 100 authors. But it's a lot.
It's close.
It's published in Biological Conservation, and you might have heard of it because it was all over the place on Twitter and Facebook for me and whatever. It's called Conservation Status of the World's Skinks, Skinkidae. Taxonomic and geographic patterns in extinction risk. So this was published in Biological Conservation. The paper itself is not very long. It's only 12 pages, including the references. But so it's very useful to have this kind of resource because it gives us the ability to do a better comparison of the kind of threat statuses that the different groups have, where it tells us, first of all, where is the global distribution of species richness within a group like this. Skinks are really found across all of the continents except for South Africa. Tried to say Antarctica and got slightly missed. Across all of the continents except for Antarctica. But I think we're all moderately familiar with skinks as these sort of long, slender, stripy, pink-tongued, typically, lizards. And we also, I think many of us know that skinks, one of their favorite things to do is to lose their legs. From an evolutionary perspective, many skinks have gone and lost their legs. But I was not fully aware of the density of skink diversity in Australia.
Yeah.
And not just Australia, but also parts of Australasia. So New Guinea has extremely high diversity of skinks as well.
That's the first thing that I saw when I saw this paper. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. There are locations in Australia, especially in northeastern Australia, that have 66 sympatric species of skink. There are not a lot of places in the world where a single family of lizards has that level of diversity.
But I'm going to say that one of the reasons, and this is why I think, is that a lot of, other lizards in other parts of the world are covering the same ecological niches that those skinks are doing in Australia.
Like jimmies.
Yeah.
Like nostalmids, like lacertids, like a lot of those, cordelids even.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cordelids, I guess, as well. Certainly the cordelids are occupying that large skink ecomorph that is not otherwise occupied within Australia, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from the Australian skinks are truly fantastic. I mean, they have skinks that live in social groups and have active parental care. They have arboreal skinks. I mean, Prasinaihema, which is not found in Australia, I think it's only in New Guinea. But Prasinaihema is an arboreal skink that has lamellae on its toes like a gecko, and has green blood.
Or an anole.
Or an anole, yes. So we try not to mention those on the show.
Yeah, but we had to mention.
I like the Tribolinotus, the red-eyed crocodile skinks. I think those are my favorites.
When I found out that those were skinks, my mind was a little bit blown.
Does not look like a skink. Yeah.
Does not look like a
skink.
So,
what I want to know is that do the paper talk about the way the biogeographical hypothesis about how the family got distributed around the world? Because it's very interesting to me how poorly diverse they are in the neotropics, for example.
So one of the big problems,
but poorly diverse, I should say, in relation to other lizards, because we still have a lot of skink species, but
certainly,
not so much diversity in ecological niches or genera.
Yeah, so I mean, part of the reason it might give the impression of having low species richness, total species richness within South America and Central America might be related to very strong turnover, right? A heat map, like they've used in the first figure of their paper, shows only how many species there are in a given location. But if you have very strong geographic turnover, then you would always have like one or two species per location. And, that's just, that's sort of misleading in a figure like this. But the answer to your question is no, they don't have a phylogeny within the paper. As far as I'm aware, the skink phylogeny remains relatively poorly resolved at the species level because sampling is relatively low. And I don't know how bad that problem is within Australia, because I know there are massive amounts of work being done on Australian skinks. In terms of species diversification, they have very weird things where there are species that are actively in the process of transitioning from viviparity to oviparity and back, and all of that kind of research is really fostered and very intensely carried out in Australia. So, I think there's a little bit of to some extent, I think there's a bias here as well. There are many authors on this paper. There are not a lot of authors from some of the places where there is a relatively high diversity, even if it's not quite as high as the Australian diversity, right? And that's a bit of a shame. But working towards a tree of the skinks is, I think, a really important goal that we have not gotten to yet. So yeah, that's missing. There's not really a discussion of the biogeography of the skinks as a whole, nor their evolution. But that's not really what they were going for. They were mostly trying to figure out what is predisposing skinks to being locally threatened, and what is the relationship between geography, taxonomy, and threat status of the different skinks. And that, I think, is, unsurprisingly, the most threatened skinks are the ones that are in Australia, because there's just the greatest density of them. But there are a few skinks that have gone extinct, right?
In the Caribbean islands, in the Antilles, there are several species that have gone extinct or are very near extinction.
Yeah, exactly. So there are some species that are close to extinction. I think in most cases those are island restricted. So there are, I think on Christmas Island there is also a skink that has gone extinct or is close to extinction. But on the whole, I think a lot of skinks are actually moderately resilient to habitat alteration, right? And it's what we can take away from this paper, I mean, just looking at some of the values that they've highlighted in the abstract, 14% of all skinks are coded as having declining populations within the IUCN, and some 14% are listed as data deficient. And so important to mention, there are, according to this paper, 1,714 described skink species. So there are a lot of skinks. So when we say the 14% are data deficient and also 14% have declining populations, 14% of 1,700 is a lot. That's still a lot of species.
Yeah.
I think taxonomy is a big problem. So, like, the actual how well understood the skinks are is a really major problem in many places. In Madagascar, we have lots of species that are waiting to be described.
And I was going to say, in the Americas in general, skinks tend to be very morphologically conservative. So it's not super easy sometimes to, taxonomy has taken a while to recognize the different lineages. And that's a big case of that is in South America, where a lot of the species have been recently described. Until very recently, they were all considered one or two species, and now we have 20, 30 species coming out of it.
That's kind of true in North America as well, isn't it? I mean, you've got, like, the all of them are sort of 5-line skink-ish.
That's why I say that in the Americas they're very morphologically conservative.
Yeah.
Like even today, we have it, and anybody in the United States who has run into a skink, they always like, what is this, a 5-line skink or is a broadhead skink? You don't know what you're looking at until you pick it up sometimes. So.
Yeah, that's very true. Skinks for me were one of the very first groups that got me excited and interested in herpetology. I think the same is true for Hiral, as people will hear later, right? They're just so attractive. They're so, I don't know, there's something about them that really makes children want to chase them, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, what do you think about the diversity of skinks within South Africa, Hiral?
So I think it's, again, I think they're not a group that's been explored very much, especially in terms of the diversity. I can tell you now the same sort of thing. You can look at a striped skink and a variegated skink and kind of, not know the difference if you're looking from very far until you pick them up.
Yeah.
I think, again, this paper is a good foundation for understanding the rest of what needs to be done, which is where I think a lot of research is headed, which is great.
Yeah. I think it's also fantastic that we see, so they've included within the paper also a plot of species accumulation over time with species descriptions, and we can see that there has been an almost constant rate of species description in skinks since the 1830s and 40s. That's amazing, because most groups have recently undergone a huge burst in the rate of description. But the skinks have just been pretty consistent, right? Because a lot of people are just like, this one's different. And one of the useful things is, of course, that phylodosis, the scale patterns on the skinks, is super useful in identifying them and describing them.
I looked up African skink, striped skink,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks ridiculously like the North American 5-line skink.
Yeah.
Right down to the blue tail.
I had this moment when I was in Kansas going herping with some friends, and I saw a western skink, I think is what it's called, for the very first time, that has this, the juvenile has this gorgeous blue tail. And the only other place I've ever seen and caught blue-tailed skinks was in Malawi when I was a tiny kid. And I was like, what? I did not, what? Why is this here?
Well, the 5-line skinks, when they're babies, have bright blue tails
Yeah.
as well. And That's ridiculous. They can't be closely related. So what?
No, and they tend to have the same coloration in many parts of the world. It's a common pattern.
That's that's next level convergence there. That's crazy.
To some extent, there's a great deal of conservative morphology in the very widespread skinks. And I think that is possibly what's going on between the African skinks and the South African skinks and the American ones. It's possible that they just haven't done a lot, but it's unusual, I guess, in the respect that skinks really like to diversify ecologically. Like they do it very well in Madagascar. They've done it fantastically in Australia and Australasia. So.
Yeah.
That is what I would like to know. That's the part that I'm interested that is not answered in the paper, and that's the part that I'm most interested in. Why they have diversified
there and not in
other places, like were there other groups already occupying those niches by the time skinks got there? Mm-hmm. Like that's the kind of questions that you really want to know, because they're obviously very adaptive. It's a very adaptive radiation of lizards.
I wonder if they have their point of origin within Australia. Because
that's what,
yeah. I mean, that shows a little bit of my own cluelessness about the group. But I would guess, based on those diversity estimates, that they must have originated in at least within Gondwana, within southern Gondwana.
That tends to be the case, right? Usually, where you see the most diversity within a group is where they usually originated. It's not always the case, but
not always, but
it seems to be.
Yeah.
But it could very well be like the elapids and their explosive radiation in Australia as well. And it would be interesting to see that dynamic between, the predator-prey, snakes versus lizards or skinks.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That would be really interesting.
I mean, there are many avenues
so interesting
in which
that all of the spiny skinks of which I'm aware are universally within Australasia and Australia, right? I can't think of any outside, like in the Americas or in Africa, that are really thorny.
So we've got a few cordyllids.
But the cordyllids are not skinks.
No, okay, yes.
But that's what I'm saying. So in other parts of the world, that niche is used by other.
That's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah. It's being used because in South America we have gymnostelmids doing that.
Yeah.
And in the United States you have like iguanians that are spiky, and so it's not.
You're thinking of like I can't say the name, Egernia or
Egernia for instance, or the crocodile skinks that we were mentioning before.
Yeah.
I mean, Egernia, if anybody is interested in some of the most fascinating behavior in any lizard, go look up some of the research that's been carried out on Egernia and their parental care and stuff. They are so cool.
It's wild, yeah.
I saw some for sale at Hum a few years ago, and it was the first time I'd seen one in person, and they are just the most charming little lizards. I think they would be fantastic. If you had a large enough enclosure to have a family group, they would be really interesting to keep.
They almost, I mean, body shape wise, they almost are like Uromastyx or something.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we should also say that a lot of skinks also in a lot of places, like in the neotropics, reproduce differently because they have almost like a mammal-like placenta.
You're right.
And they don't, so that also can be giving them some sort of advantage ecologically or compared to other groups, which is why they have been able to, infiltrate, quote unquote, an area that was, occupied by so many other lizard species. So there are so many avenues in which you could, like Hiral said, this is a great foundation to start exploring other avenues of research.
Exactly. And also, in terms of the conservation thing, I think it's critical to have this kind of baseline for a lot of the work that happens next. For the amphibians of Madagascar, a similar paper was published, I think in 2009 or 2010, and it sort of set, again, the baseline from which everything then progresses. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but the chameleon specialist group for the IUCN is also thinking about doing something similar, but has decided that we will embark on that plan once the new assessments are all done. So for those who don't know, IUCN Red List assessments are done periodically, and I think depending on the different group, the periodicity differs. But the plan is to have a reassessment of all the chameleons relatively soon. And so maybe in the future we'll have a similar perspective, because it would be very interesting to see how the different families of lizards, obviously family is such a meaningless category, but if you divide the tree at some arbitrary level, it would be really interesting to see which group truly is the most threatened. Because the hypothesis that we chameleon researchers are bandying about, at least, is that chameleons are possibly the most threatened lizards in the world. But who knows? It really depends where you draw the line. So, okay. And now we can move on. Let's talk about some horny crocodiles, shall we?
Well, I thought it would be a great time because we have neglected crocodilians so much from this podcast.
That's so true.
They are reptiles, people. So
they're basically birds.
Well, but you know,
very angry birds.
Yes, very angry, scaly.
Very
birds.
toothy, angry birds. Yes.
So there is this super cool paper called Paleogenomics Illuminates the Evolutionary History of the Extinct Holocene Horned Crocodile of Madagascar, Boae robustus. That was written by Hekala et al. And it was published
in Communications Biology, which
Communications Biology,
a journal that is very new.
But it's from Nature.
Yes, it's from the Nature group.
It's from the Nature group. So
these are big boys, right? These are big crocodiles.
Yeah, well, what makes them really interesting is that they had all this crazy morphology where they had like this horn. I don't know what that's called in crocodilians. It's like this supratemporal.
Yeah, it's a supratemporal extension. It's basically it's basically they have very angry eyebrows. That's what's going on. They have these large knobs above in the supratemporal region, basically just behind the eye at the back of the head.
If I was to try to ride one, could I use them as handlebars?
Potentially. They would not give you a lot of grip.
Oh.
No. So I recently sat on one.
You sat on a crocodile?
So I injected. Anyways, we were doing some research, so we had to insert a paralytic drug into crocodiles. So I had the whole experience of, covering the eyes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really pretty cool.
That sounds like fun. Back in the day.
Nile crocodiles?
Yeah.
Nice.
Which are notoriously bad-tempered, right?
Yeah, they are not known for being friendly.
Yeah, there's a very well-known cichlid researcher was killed and I believe eaten by a Nile crocodile in Madagascar. Not good. But Madagascar actually brings us on to a relevant point. The Boae robustus is the name of this crocodile, the horned crocodile, and it's from Madagascar. It was found in western Madagascar, and there has been some debate as to when these things went extinct.
And what they were related to too.
Is this one of those weird crocodiles that went extinct, like the walking around on two legs and eating plants and
so it might have had a slightly more upright posture, but I don't think there's any. So that's how it's usually illustrated in the standing posture that most crocodiles can adopt.
That semi-erect sort of
that posture that you sometimes see alligators adopting. So interestingly, there appear to be folk tales, or at least there is, how do you say, cultural knowledge of there being two different forms of crocodiles in western Madagascar. So people discern there having been large and small crocodiles. But around the 1920s, 1930s, I don't remember now what exactly it says in the... So there's a chapter in a book that's coming out this year or next year, probably next year, that goes into the history of the Nile crocodile in Madagascar in great depth. And there was a mass extirpation of Nile crocodiles in Madagascar in the 20th century. So if there had been Fwai among them during that period, they are gone.
Yeah. Well, I was going to also point out that even in the relatively recent past, a lot of animals were referred to as crocodiles that were not necessarily crocodiles. This came up a while ago when we were talking about an illustration that I had found that said crocodile, but was very clearly depicting a Euromastix. And
oh wow,
but,
that's a
but,
big difference.
But you go back and you look at the writings from that time, and they called them little crocodiles. It was like
yes.
it was just a name.
Yeah.
You know, so it wouldn't surprise me if it could be something like that also, where it was I'll have to go back and
called them a crocodile.
This was a conversation I had a few months ago, so I don't remember exactly who the artist was originally, but it was from one of those databases of public domain Victorian era art.
Oh.
And somebody was saying, this looks so dumb, it doesn't look like a crocodile at all, and it's very clearly not supposed to be a crocodile. You can see it's supposed to be a Euromastix. So.
Yeah, there are certainly bizarre stories like that. I think in Madagascar, the way that this study was carried out, that I can half remember, would have been pretty clear if they were talking about two different things. The genus name Fwai is the Malagasy word for crocodile. So in general, the people do know of these, or certainly know of crocodiles. They can be a serious problem in the rainy season in Madagascar.
So what I've read is that there are folk tales in Madagascar that differentiate between two types of crocodiles.
Yes, exactly.
Where there's only one alive today, but these animals were not. They're very recently extinct.
Very recently.
The skulls from when they took the samples are just 1,300 to 1,400 years old.
Yeah, and that's around the time that Madagascar was settled in large numbers from basically Borneo, from
This is bordering on cryptozoology, you guys.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. No, I actually think there's what's the name of the stupid show on Animal Planet where the guy goes looking for. I think that one episode is about looking for this crocodile.
It's possible. There are a whole bunch of extinct megafaunal species in Madagascar, right? So we have these the very large gorilla-like lemurs that went extinct with the people who arrived. We have the
sloth lemurs too.
Exactly. The sloth lemurs. We have the elephant birds. We have giant tortoises that turns out to be probably identical with Aldabra shellis. So there are these very, very numerous large megafaunal groups that have gone extinct, some of which kind of persist within folktales, so that people will tell you that they have seen one of the elephant birds within the last 20 years or whatever. And, no, probably not.
Can I take a brief aside because I just worked on something that is in the same genre?
Yeah.
I did art for the International Cryptozoology Museum for their upcoming expedition to go look for the Trinity Alps giant salamander, which is my favorite cryptid. I don't really think it's there, but it's a giant. It's an Andreas that people say they saw in Northern California.
Right, out of all places.
Here's the thing. Northern California, Trinity does have habitat that's pretty similar to the habitat Andreas is found in Asia. Mm-hmm. And it's not a huge stretch to say that cryptobranchids could be. I mean, they have a North American origin.
Cryptobranchids in America, right?
Right.
So.
I think that there is a possible explanation that, I mean, there are a lot of
it's Bigfoot when he's going for a swim.
Yes. I don't think they're going to find anything, to be honest.
I mean,
but
count me in the no camp for that.
But I would love to be wrong. And
of course.
You know.
That's how I feel generally about cryptozoology.
Me too.
I would love to be wrong about some of these things, but I just don't see it as possible.
No. I think it's.
But I got paid to draw a giant cryptobranchid salamander for the International Cryptozoology Museum, and I think that's great.
Let's be honest, is the same thing as drawing a mud puppy.
Not
a mud puppy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. It's not.
Yes.
Louder.
Just scale it up. You know.
Yeah. But I mean, the idea of one standing up on two legs and walking around does look very much like Bigfoot in my mind. So
that's War with the Newts. That's
yeah. We've come full circle.
We have. No, I was going to say there is also the possibility California is home to was home over the last 100 years to a lot of Chinese and Japanese immigrants. So it's also possible that there are introduced Andreas living there, which would be awesome too.
That would be very cool.
I just have very high difficulty believing that the United States, which is one of the most highly populated and which has one of the, people have gotten here everywhere. I mean, it's like I always say, I want to go somewhere in COVID in Florida where there are no people. There's nowhere in Florida with no people. Everything here is full of people. I cannot go anywhere.
Okay, I agree with you, but also to be fair, Northern California is pretty.
I know. California is more more sparsely populated, but still.
I have an easier time believing in a rogue cryptobranchid than Bigfoot.
Of course.
Yeah. An animal out of place is always more reasonable to believe in than a fictitious animal.
Correct. Yeah.
Exactly.
So anyway, back to fly.
Sorry.
So what I was going to say is that one of the cool things about this paper is that one of the things that came out with this paper is that it shows that the origin of crocodilians or crocodilids in particular is Africa, and from there they have expanded around the world, which I thought it was super cool. They have a very good phylogenetic tree that shows all living crocodilian species and how Voai, relates to them. And they used to believe that Voai was an Australian crocodilid, right? So Australiaminus is that tiny. I forgot what the common name is. Talking about crappy common names. But what the common name for Osteolaemus tetraspis is, but it's a very small crocodilid that look almost like a smooth-fronted caiman from South America. They have kind of the similar look. They're small.
They're called dwarf crocodiles. So I want to say yes, maybe African origin, or yes, no. Let's put it this way. Very probably African origin. But Voai robustus is the divergence from the rest of the crocodilids is surprisingly recent. So they place it at about 25 million years ago.
Yeah, but that's from the crocodilians.
Yes, right? From the crocodilians. Yes, sure. But Madagascar was isolated essentially 80 million years ago. So it swam there, which is cool.
Yeah.
And so we should point out the meat and gravy of this paper is that they have sequenced DNA from this specimen. So this is paleogenomics, which is what the group here in Potsdam that I'm in does, getting DNA out of subfossil bones.
Although we have to say that these are barely fossils because
barely fossils. I mean, this is not really a fossil. This is this is quite recent. Still, it has all kinds of problems with with decay, and DNA does not preserve particularly well in these.
No, but to be honest, I was surprised when I read this paper. I mean, I was like, these things are so recent. I'm surprised they are just now taking DNA sample from these specimens. I would imagine it's something that is so recent as 1,300, 1,400 years ago. They would have done this a long time ago, especially when there were questions about the taxonomic position of Hawaii in particular.
I wanna clone this thing way more than a thylacine.
Well, there are two questions that are relevant to that process, right? So the first is getting a hold of a specimen is not easy. The animals getting hold of a specimen of the fly outside of Madagascar is not super easy.
There are a lot of regulations in Madagascar.
Yes, especially because paleontological objects are treated as rocks and exported under mineral codes, and the mineral laws are even more strict, I think, than the biological laws. So it's generally very difficult to export and loan fossils from Madagascar.
Huh. That's interesting because I know there's a huge problem with like Morocco is often criticized for having it's the Wild West and people are taking stuff they shouldn't be.
Yes, I mean I don't think it has been historically as much of a problem in Madagascar. To some extent, sure. But certainly not to the extent where it's not like Brazil, where we're finding all of these fundamentally mind-boggling fossils that were illegally exported at some point in the past and now are passed off. It's more like when people do find very cool stuff, it becomes a little bit of a complication in order to figure out how legal it was, whatever. So that has delayed, I think, some of the work here. Not casting any aspersions on this paper. I think this is probably fine. I noticed that there are no Malagasy researchers among the authors, but that is often the case, even in my own work that has been a problem in the past. Why is that a problem?
Why is that a case?
Why is that the case? In this case, I don't really know. I don't know many paleontologists working in Madagascar. I don't personally know any Malagasy paleontologists.
But that for me, then there's a problem because there are Madagascar has a rich fossil history. They have quite a bunch of interesting fossils, and there's a lot of research that have been done. So how come there's no? That is a problem. There should be
some of the recent mammal things I know have had Malagasy authors on them. This paper does not, and that's not good.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know if any other. I don't know if any other paper that has been published on Madagascar fossils have had Malagasy authors, so I might be speaking out of not knowing, but I think there definitely should be.
Certainly,
they have a ton of stuff to work on. I mean, there should definitely be some Malagasy workers there.
I can only strongly agree with you. If this is also something that I to talk about my own work, have tried hard to promote as well. We often still have a huge bias in terms of Malagasy authorship, and one of the things that we find particularly challenging, or I find particularly challenging sometimes, is having the Malagasy authors really be engaged with the actual publication. But that's just in many times it's a time-related issue, and it also depends. Like I think it's important to have the people involved in the field work on the authorship list, even if they can't necessarily look at the manuscript, they wouldn't necessarily understand it. I think that's a really, really important thing for people to do, and it's something that we have done quite a bit. but there's also an important sometimes it's also important to have acknowledgement. So I will admit that there's one paper that I have where I have two co-authors on the paper who are Malagasy who never saw the paper. They never looked at the manuscript, as far as I'm aware. And I also don't think that's a really good practice. Because then you have people who are on your papers who are not at all involved in the actual research.
So what's happened? What happened with Malagasy researchers? There have to be Malagasy researchers.
There are, yeah, there are, but there aren't very many. In herpetology, the field is relatively small, and the same is true in many of the other fields. The education system in Madagascar is
I imagine, but there has to be they have such a rich, fossil history in particular, that I think there has to be more. There has to be more to include whatever researchers there are. There have to be more to include them, because they have to. That is what it's gonna.
I think we're dancing around the issue of colonialism.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's pretty obvious. This is what happened. There is a lot of research, and I can think of a bunch of dinosaurs from Madagascar, and I don't know again if some of those publications had Malagasy researchers, but I doubt it. And they have to be included in whatever research that is going to come up from Madagascar. They have to be included.
So I think this is very true for the rest of Africa as well, because it's pretty much the same, right? Like the paper with the gecko and the fluorescence. I mean, really cool paper. But there are Namibian herpetologists that have observed this, right? It's just a matter of having them included. Either there's so many different things that play a role, like you don't know these authors because they're not on any kind of platform. If you want to contact them to do any kind of research, how do you do that? And I think that's where the problem comes in, and it goes for most reptilian groups. I think a lot more people in Europe and the Americas, North America, have published on African herps than local people have.
Yeah, I was going to say it sounds like there's an institutional thing here where it's the system has been built that way for a long, long time.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yeah,
certainly. This is a really complicated topic, because when we're talking about this, there's also a certain, you do not want to have authors on the list who are only placeholders for their origin. That's something that I am opposed to. And this is why I say, having people who are involved in the field work but have never seen the paper and don't know what it contains and don't know that their names are on it, having them as authors is, from my perspective, unethical, because they have no idea. That's like someone using your name.
Not only I think it's not only unethical. I think it's almost disrespectful, even, because you have to value somebody's work. And what I would like is a little bit what they did with that fossil of that shark that came out that had the crazy limbs like a wing. A bunch of researchers was found in Mexico, and there was one Mexican author that nobody heard about or has ever heard about before, and apparently the person is not even they just used him as a placeholder, and I think that is disrespectful. I think that there are a ton of Mexican paleontologists that could have.
I totally agree with you. What I'm saying is it's not always possible, or some. In every case, working within a collaboration within Europe is exactly the same. People who can't vouch for the research, have never seen the research, shouldn't be authors, because they shouldn't be authors. You're not an author if you've never looked at the result. So including someone just by name on a paper who cannot really be contacted about it, has no real relevance to it, is not necessarily the right move. That being said, it's extremely important to involve local scientists in the research that you're doing, as long as those scientists are really doing, involved in the research. It's not good enough to put their name on the paper without them being able to say that they were actually involved.
That sounds almost like an institutional failing of the ability to recognize a contributor to a paper who is not necessarily an author in the conventional sense.
Right. I agree. This is a real problem with and I've seen blog posts about this and stuff. Like our current system for acknowledging contributions to a paper are step 1 author and step 1,000,000 are the acknowledgements. And
right.
there's nothing in between
there should be
where we
something
can say this person contributed fundamentally to this project but is not involved as an author on the paper.
Right.
And that I find very difficult, especially in these places where, if I send some of the people I've worked with in the field don't have an email address, they don't have a telephone number, there's no way to get in contact with them about this thing. So putting them on an author list is a bit ludicrous.
Right.
Right?
But to me, that's, it's 2021, and our ability to recognize someone for their contributions, that's...
We need to get... Yeah, we need
to me,
better
that sounds
ways to do
like the colonialism is baked into this, and it needs to be addressed. It needs to be... And I'm an outsider. I don't write or contribute to scientific papers. That's what it sounds like to me from an outsider perspective.
Yeah, I can only agree. I mean, I can say for my own part, with the colleagues that we work with very closely are fantastic, and we have amazing Malagasy colleagues. So Andu Rakotwarason and Fanu Ratsuavina they both did their PhDs with Miguel Vences here in Germany. Miguel has been running a program for a really long time, building capacity for herpetology research in Madagascar, and has been involved with the training of many scientists who are now at the top of Malagasy herpetology. I don't know what the situation in paleontology is, but in that case, it's also, it's about supporting those researchers, giving them access to the resources. And
that's
everything.
what I think it needs to be done.
That's something
Gabriel, I think I'm in agreement with you here that it sounds like it's not enough to just there needs to be more there. There needs to be
there needs to be support towards the local researchers.
We're not and Mark, I should say too, this sounds like we're coming at you, and it's not. It's just
no.
This is a bigger problem than that.
I'm happy to acknowledge that this is a problem that I have also interfaced with, and as you can, I think, tell from the way that I talk about it, it's not something that is super easy for me, because it is something that it's a bias and a problem that I'm very conscious of, and it's not easy to navigate the question of having a name on the list for a diversity quota versus actually being committed to supporting and being involved with these researchers. And I for my own peace of mind, I have done put a lot of effort into supporting students and working with colleagues in Madagascar, and that's something that we are very conscious of. In this paper, I didn't expect the conversation to go in this direction, but I just checked in the acknowledgements. They also haven't acknowledged any Malagasy people. I suspect that the specimen that has been examined was collected between 1927 and 1930. I suspect that they decided to analyze this fossil without ever speaking with a Malagasy person. Yeah. I can't speak to the authors. I don't know any of these people personally.
But based on the time frame...
Based on the authorship, based on the acknowledgements, that's not exactly a great look.
No. And where is the specimen house? Did they say where the specimen is housed?
Yes, it is at the... I think it's at the American... Yeah, it's at the American Museum of Natural History.
Okay, so that explains
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, the curator for herpetology at the American Museum of Natural History, which is Chris Raxworthy, is not an author on this paper, and Chris has worked very closely with Malagasy people too. So, yeah. Anyway, this is a serious problem.
I mean, I did not think we were going to go down that road either, but you know.
Well, but if you know, it's a problem, and people have to, you know, this is not something that can keep happening. And to be honest, it's something that we see a lot in paleontology. And recently, I've been hearing about this from paleontologists saying, "Oh, this paper had these problems, and this other paper had these problems," and we keep seeing the same pattern, and that it cannot happen.
I think it's easy. So going back to what Hiral mentioned about the gecko fluorescence paper, because the gecko fluorescence paper was a little bit of a crazy project that was started by my colleague David while we were doing our PhDs, and he had these geckos in captivity at home, and so during the entire project, neither of us. Well, I have never been to Namibia, and David. I think David visited Namibia at some point many years ago, but for us it was the excitement of discovering this thing and then getting it finished, and at no point did I actually think to myself, oh, these are actually, we should be talking with Namibian scientists about this stuff, because in many ways it was like working with a zebrafish in a box. We were entirely separated from the ecological system. There's been a lot of thoughts about, doing ecological research in Madagascar and then in Namibia, and taking this further and working then in collaboration with Namibian scientists. But for the actual discovery of that thing, it was totally separated. And I can understand, having been through that, I can understand how people working on fossils often can think to themselves, okay, I'm working in this box of, this is a fossil that was collected a long time ago. I have it at my disposal, and therefore I can work on this freely. That's obviously not the case, and thinking about that's actually a problem that I had not been conscious of. But
I think that's also part of why bringing this to light makes you aware of things, and once you're aware of things, you're not allowed to repeat them again without being how am I trying to say this? Once you know,
somewhat complicit, right? Yeah,
exactly. Once you know something is problematic, you might have done something that was not
the important thing is to learn from your mistakes. And be conscious of your biases and your errors, and try not to repeat them.
Yeah,
I can tell you now that one of the biggest issues is funding not being channeled to the right places, and funding is, a whole topic altogether. But I think that's one of the biggest things, right? Like anybody can sort of decide that they want to do an expedition and go collect samples. But if local people don't have funding to even do something like that, then they can't publish anything. And in another scenario, they as local people probably have collected or observed something, but they're not associated with an institute. They don't have funding to now even think about publishing something of the sort.
Right.
And like Gabriel said, these are kind of topics that are important to just shed light on, so that people do start speaking about it, and something can at some point be done about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's very important that people avoid being parachuting scientists, or that neocolonialism is rife in modern research. Herpetology is no stranger to this. Paleontology, it has huge history and problems, and we just must try to overcome our forebears and do a better job of capacity building, because it's so important that we build the local researcher capacity. If I could work together with a huge community of Malagasy scientists, I would be so thrilled. The community right now is small and tight-knit and strong, but it's still small. And that's something that we need to work on overcoming and building, and over time, I think that's something that's happening very well. So, yeah.
Well, that discussion took a different turn of what we were expecting.
It did. But the answer is, apparently, Foie robustus swam to Madagascar, where it was promptly whacked over the head by by local people, although it apparently had a good 20 million year stint. So there might be fossils of related species on Madagascar. Who knows? Still not clear when it actually made it to the island, but it certainly went extinct very recently.
Bring it back.
Well, it diverged from the thing in the Oligocene, so from the other crocodilians, yeah. So
and when do we think it went extinct?
Very recently, like
these fossils are from
ago.
Within historical times.
Within historical times.
1300 years.
Wow.
That's medieval
times.
times.
Nothing. Yeah, that's nothing.
Yeah. Okay, so Ethan, do you wanna talk quickly about some of your herps?
Sure. So recently, I got some new snakes, which I am really excited about. I got a nice little Western hognose, and I was going to say was not prepared for how difficult it is to find a standard issue hognose, Western hognose snake. The morphs on those have been, I guess they're the new ball python. So
yeah,
really hard to find. I mean, it's crazy. And it was my son's 10th birthday last week, and for his birthday, I got him a children's python because I did not want to get another ball python. I don't want a ball python; they're boring to me. So we went with the children's python, and he named him Monty, which is great. So.
Very good. So, for those who don't know, that's Antaresia childreni, right?
Yeah.
The Antaresia are the smallest pythons in the world.
You know, they're what's really cool is that they're very small, but they look like little miniature, tiny.
Absolutely.
They remind me of a big python. So they're like they have almost
in every respect. Yeah.
Almost like a retic looking face. And
I kept Antaresia maculosa for I think 2 years, and they were the least pleasant snakes I've ever kept.
Well, this one is pretty friendly. I will say it's a little bit quirky about being taken out of the enclosure, but once you get him out, he's very calm and chill, and I think he's going to make a good pet. He's adapted well, and he doesn't seem to have any of the feeding issues that ball pythons tend to have.
They certainly have a strong feeding response.
Yeah. Well, he took food almost immediately. So.
Hiral, have you ever kept snakes?
No. Which is really interesting to a lot of people, especially because a lot of people that got interested in herpetology in Africa kept snakes, or they work specifically with snakes. But I never did. And now, so I'm actually based at the reptile center that I speak about later, and we've got the house that I'm staying in is kind of like a quarantine. So I've got 3 snakes here: one Burmese python, a ball python, and an albino python.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's nice.
Fun. So you get to be around the snakes without having to necessarily be like the primary caretaker.
Yes. Yeah.
Perks of the job.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do it. That's the best way to do it.
It is.
Not that
Pretty great.
Not that they require a ton of actual maintenance, really.
Yes,
for the
I
most
do
part.
find snakes to be some of the easiest animals to keep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then
Give us an update on the Gonatodes, Ethan. How are you Gonatodes?
Gonatodes, the female is now fully grown. The male has sort of been courting her, doing his little tail wiggle thing.
That's the
it's sort of-
fuscus, right?
Yeah. It does like this. It does like a little...
Yeah, they do these very jerky tail motions. Huh?
Yeah.
It's very interesting that the jerky tail motion seems to be maintained across all geckos.
They love that, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just doing it, obviously you can't see it, but I was doing the motion. Yeah, I'm hoping that I'll get some eggs soon from them. The Vittatus that I have, I only see him about once a week or so. He comes out of hiding and
Really?
yeah.
That is
Well,
so
he's in a
strange.
he's in a really densely planted vivarium.
But
So-
they're usually very outgoing and
Yeah, I mean he's pretty outgoing, but I don't see him a lot. I think he's off doing his own thing, and he only comes out every once in a while. But he's happy in there. He's doing well.
Yeah.
That's
He
awesome.
he regrew. He entirely because when he lost his tail when he was shipped to me.
Yeah.
And it's completely regrown at this point. So
That's nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think just lots of my Neurojuris crocatus started laying eggs. I thought they were going to skip this year because they didn't seem like they were interested. It's really late, but they started laying eggs this year, and my Japanese firebellies started laying eggs for the first time.
Cool.
So I'm pretty
Nice.
excited
So
about
you'll
that.
have even more amphibians in the box.
Yep. Yeah, I'm excited about the Synops because I made the call that like when a couple years ago got my axolotl tattoo, and my plan was for every species that I have successfully bred in captivity, I want to add to it. So.
I understand. I had such aspirations, not with tattoos, but with other things, and they didn't work out.
You had what was it? The elephant trunk snakes for a while.
Yeah, Acrocortis, they're fantastic.
Yeah, those are really cool.
Really cool. Yeah, unfortunately, one of them drowned. It got stuck in a piece of wood while it was trying to shed, and I don't exactly know what happened, but it couldn't get to the water surface.
They have a
that's
reputation for being not easy to care for.
Yeah,
and it's funny because the people I know who have them are all like, I don't know where that comes from because
it was very easy to care for until it had. So that one actually had a sickness. So all of the ones in the pet trade have a relatively well-known illness that is still not very well characterized. So it has they have these lesions, and the lesions can show up in various different places, and sometimes they show up on the face and in the respiratory system.
What I have heard is that the people who have had success with I know we're going off on a tangent again here, but the people who have had success with them are the people who have had success with fish. Like that, you're treating them
values.
almost like fish. You're
Yeah.
caring for water quality and.
That probably matters a lot. In our case, they were doing so that one, the one that was very sick, died from drowning. I think it had just generally it was not
Other
doing well
issues,
because of those lesions that it had. The other one had the lesions. We treated them with medication. I can't remember what it was, but the lesions went away. And then at some point, it must have gotten out of the tank that it was in, and they are incapable of living outside of water, so it died. And I was not there at the time. I had passed it on to someone else to take care of. So sadly,
I had it's kind of like because I kept lungfish. I lungfish for a while, and I have compared notes with other people, and also similar. They seem to succumb just very suddenly. Like they'll be doing great, and then the next day, done, and that's what happened. And I don't know what the it's the usual where we don't really know the whole story with these animals that we have.
There's so much that we could still to learn about them.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we should move on to the next segment, which is where we have our delightful interview with Hiral. So here is that. Alrighty, then let's get on with it.
Cool.
I want to keep that in, so let's just get started. Hello, and welcome to Hiral. Hiral, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Hiral Naik. I am, a herpetologist from South Africa, and I'm very glad to be here on the show.
It's very exciting for us to have you here. Hiral, where did you and I meet? We had met before the World Congress last year, right? I feel like...
No, we met at...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Somehow I feel like I've known you for a very long time.
That might be because I did contact you for some of your data for some of the Madagascar species for the Lamprophiidae. Maybe my name is familiar.
Wow, I don't remember that at all, but it must have been a while ago.
Yeah.
So, maybe tell us a little bit about your history within herpetology, how you got into it, where you're from, what your background is, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. How far back do you want me to go?
As far back as you want to go. I have listened to the Women in Ecology and Evolution podcast episode. It was episode 10, in which you were on the panel talking about South African herpetologists. And first of all, the We podcast is perhaps my favorite podcast. It's so good.
Yeah.
But also, so I know already quite a bit about your sort of backstory, but the listeners, unless they pause to go listen to that, which I would totally sympathize with, they don't know your backstory. So maybe tell us a little bit about where you came from and how you got into herpetology and all that jazz.
Sure. Cool. So I was born in Zimbabwe, a small town called Bulawayo. And I lived there for about 10 years. And that's pretty much where my love for wildlife and nature kind of started. I was a very outdoorsy kid. Loved playing outside, looking at little ants, doing their thing, climbing mango trees in my back garden.
The dream.
And
I was curious, so...
It's a common story for a lot of people that like us that like reptiles and amphibians and animals in general.
I was wondering, so growing up in Zimbabwe, I had the great privilege and joy of visiting Zimbabwe when I was like 5 years old. And because my grandparents were in Malawi at the time, and we went to visit my uncle who was living in Zimbabwe. And I remember seeing the scorpions under the rocks and having my cousins who were even younger than I was, like turning over rocks and being like, "Scorpy, Daddy, Scorpy." And so, like, I guess growing up there, what was your experience of being surrounded by sort of, I guess, what many people, at least those living in Europe, would consider very exciting animals? Did you have a lot of exposure to herps?
Not that I can think of. I mean, your common geckos and skinks that you see around the house. And I mean, that's certainly fascinating. Most people kind of look at them with curiosity, as did I. But, for the most part, you aren't exposed to, what a lot of people think, the megafauna, roaming in your street.
Right.
Everything is, very much in national parks, and it's only when you go visit these national parks and kind of nature reserves that you'll actually see the wildlife. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the biggest things with growing up in Africa is that the big megafauna do take. They are the star of the show. You don't really see herps much. I mean, besides your small lizards. But I will say that we used to go to a place called Matobo Hills, and there's a rainbow skink that occurs there. And I think that, when I think back to the little things that sparked my interest in reptiles, I think that was definitely one of them, because, Matobo Hills are just kind of these round boulders all placed together. And you have these little rainbow lizards kind of everywhere. So it's something that you become fascinated by very quickly.
Yeah. Chasing very shiny lizards over rocks, I think, is, for a young child, it's anyway fascinating. I think for the general, even people who don't go into herpetology later on, it's just exciting to follow these tiny, shiny lizards. But then later on, I guess that sort of affects you and primes you for like continuing to do that sort of professionally, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever encounter chameleons in the garden or around?
Not that I can think of. And I think chameleons are also very specific to certain habitats. I mean, one of the most common ones we do find in South Africa and in Zimbabwe is your flap-necked chameleon. If you want to see some of your more, charismatic species, you'll go where it's a bit more. Yeah,
you have to go really
humid,
into the forest.
Tropical. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So you moved. You're growing up in Zimbabwe, and then eventually you moved to South Africa, right? Or you lived in India first?
Yes. So after I left Zimbabwe, I moved to India. For the simple reason that both my parents were born in India, so they had family there, and that was kind of the natural progression. We lived there for about 2 years. Again, it was great living with wildlife. My family had a little farm, and a typical Indian farm is very much trees and fruit trees and all sorts of variations of plants and shrubs, unless you're farming something like rice or that sort of thing.
Right.
So again, it was great to be in the farm, making little houses from whatever was left behind. So trees, the leaves, broken down tables, and honestly, whatever we could find. And it was a completely
different type of. And it was a completely different type of fauna from what you saw in Zimbabwe. So that must have been exciting, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I can't specifically remember much of the wildlife in terms of the animals that we saw in India. Again, I was 11, 12, so it's quite far back to remember. But there's just specific memories that do pop up, monkeys living pretty much everywhere. And honestly, I think I had a huge culture shock when I went to go live there. So I had been to India, I think about 2 years before, to travel to visit my uncle who was getting married. And, it was, even then, it was just very different. But when I moved there, now it was, trying to adjust and adapt to a completely different lifestyle.
Yeah.
The schooling system was very different. You start school at 10 o'clock, and then you finish at 5. You don't really do sports or extracurricular activities, which was very different for me because in Zim, I was also very athletic. So, I would be playing hockey or tennis after school, doing swimming or some sort of activity. And yeah, it was quite a big change. While I was there though, I naturally always had this desire to kind of travel and explore. And there was a school trip that we took or that was available rather when I was in school. And so we traveled for I think about 10 days, just a bus full of kids traveling through different parts of India. And I would say that growing up in an Indian family where you are always like you need to go with somebody, going off alone isn't really something a lot of people approve of.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm very lucky that my parents are very liberal and open-minded. So they've always kind of allowed me to do what I've wanted to do. And that was the first time I got to see different parts of India as well. Observing different habitats, being in the mountains, which was great. I think it played a huge role in me both wanting to travel and explore the outdoors even further.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a that age of childhood is such a transitionary period as well, right? Like that's around the same age that I moved from the U.S. to Switzerland, and that's also a huge culture shock. But I can't imagine it's the same kind of culture shock as you would have experienced going from Zimbabwe to India.
Yeah.
And then you guys moved to South Africa, right?
Yes. So my uncle, my dad's brother, was studying in South Africa. So he kind of convinced us to move here, so it was better for my sister and I in terms of opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't really made to, grow up in India. Let's just say that. Again, so I think I felt a lot more like home in South Africa, but I did move to Johannesburg, which is quite a big city. So this was very different again, because in Zimbabwe I was in a small town, not really big, and in India, it's just very different in terms of small city life.
Mm-hmm.
I think I went from kind of a manageable amount of people to a huge amount of people, and then to kind of a weird transition of like a lot of people, but in very isolated blocks. So, in a huge city, it's very difficult to kind of get to know people. There isn't a huge community vibe if you don't know people. And because South Africa is, very much crime driven, everything is either behind four walls, or in like cluster type housing settings.
Yeah.
So unless you live in what we call a complex of small houses, you don't really get to know your neighbor. And I think that was another big adjustment for both my family and I.
Mm-hmm. It also means you're sort of taken away from the proximity of nature, right? Did that affect your feeling going through high school and things? Were you like keen to get out again and get experience again being in the field, or?
Yeah, so I think I was also lucky to have made friends that with people that had previously, gone camping or were very well versed with the natural world, let's just say. And I think, it is, I think most people will tell you that, that period during like late primary school and high school, you're very much focused on your education, right? You have to do your normal schoolwork, your sporting activity or whatever else it is. But it's only if you have or come from a family or have those kind of friends where you will go and explore, the nature reserves and that sort of thing. So unfortunately, I didn't have that as from a family perspective. But I did have several opportunities to go with friends camping to different parts of the country, which I was lucky to do. And I think I was lucky to have retained that. But I think at some point that had changed my perspective on what I wanted as a career, what I wanted to do as a job.
So what had it been beforehand, and what did it change to?
When I was younger, I think one of the biggest things that did impact me was when I was 4 years old. My parents had given me this world atlas. It was a sticker atlas. It's very simple, but honestly, I still have this book with me because it had such a big impact on me. And when I went through that book, I always knew that I wanted to go around the world and explore different places. Not necessarily strictly cultural based or, your 7 wonders of the world. I just knew that I wanted to see different places. And I'd always wanted a career that would have allowed me to do that. So when I was in high school, I also became very fascinated by geography, naturally. I did take subjects like science and biology. And so I naturally, had this inclination towards learning more about the natural world. I also had friends that wanted to become a zoologist. So I kind of had an idea about what a zoologist was. Not that I think I saw myself going into that field. And if you will have heard me on the Women in Ecology and Evolution podcast, I mentioned the fact that, coming from an Indian family, you don't look for careers that, are not long-term, that are not going to pay you, that are where you don't see yourself settling down, eventually buying a house or a car. And it comes very naturally to a lot of, and I mean, it's not strictly coming from an Indian family, right? I think it's something very common from that previous generation.
Yeah.
And so I had never thought about being a zoologist. And so
What are you talking about with all these millionaire zoologists that are around?
It is a non-stop cash shop. I mean, it's,
that's why I always laugh when this climate deniers say that scientists are doing it for the money. What money? Where?
Yeah, no, I was always told as a kid, like, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But also, you have to choose between doing a job you like and having money. So it was very much on my mind. It was like, I'm going to live a little bit like a pauper, but I'll get to do the things that I really enjoy. And, I obviously can't complain being in Germany and having, financial stability and whatnot. But, in many ways it is a choice, because friends of mine who were in the same class and who decided to go into pharma or whatever are raking in millions a year. And I'm like, well, that's definitely not on my horizon, but yeah. So was there a point where you realized that you were particularly interested in herps, or I want to ask, like, are you a deep down herpetologist, or do you actually love all the animals and you just happen to work in herpetology? Which is both. There's no bad answer here. I just want to make it clear. This is no judgment at all.
Okay, let me get to it. I think there are several things that kind of happened along the way. So, I mean, I think for me, science was a huge part of growing up either way. I think also another big thing, so books were always presented to us as kids. And I think that has a huge impact on the way you are educated about everything. whether it's especially an encyclopedia, because it covers everything from astronomy to the human body, to dinosaurs and everything else. And little things from those books, I think, have an impact on you. So even if, I had not necessarily been interested in dinosaurs as like a career, I remember when I was, I think, 10 years old, there was a Disney movie called Dinosaur. I don't think it's very popular. Oh, okay, you guys both know it.
No, I know it. I remember very well that it is, look-wise, it's very problematic, but a lot of people do have fond memories from the movie.
I personally have never seen it. I only watched The Land Before Time, which, was my exposure to dinosaurs and paleontology.
Yeah. And so, I didn't have scientific parents. So if I had any questions, I didn't really have anybody to go to. I do remember, sitting on the lawn or lying down on the lawn and looking up at the sky, thinking about why the sky was blue. And these are all questions that finally got answered when I took science in high school. I think with some level of disappointment. I want to say it was, I expected some really cool answer about how, there was a bunch of really cool experiments that happened. Technically it is, like, chemicals, how light playing around, and voila, you've got your blue sky. But it still had, it was still very interesting. But in my early high school, I was very interested in learning things about clouds. And, geography did become quite a big part of my high school career. And when I was thinking about what kind of careers I could pursue, I did actually think about becoming a climatologist. And that's kind of where I went after high school, because I thought, okay, climatology is kind of a career where you could make some money, but still be outdoors somewhat. If I'm being completely honest, if there was a job where you'd go chasing, hurricanes and all sorts of exciting things like that, like I always wanted to go see a volcano or experience an earthquake, or, like I always had this inclination to do something, to be in a dangerous situation. Let's put it that way. No idea why, and I don't know. Become
relevant to later in the story, I imagine.
Exactly. And I think playing with danger has its own kind of excitement to it, right? You get that adrenaline rush, but it didn't really, honestly, also coming from a family perspective, which I've only recently started to realize, is that you are taught to be very calm. Coming from an Indian family, if you're a woman, you are meant to be very timid. You're supposed to follow the rules. You're not supposed to speak out of line. And I went against all of these. I remember my grandmother telling my mom, like, oh, look at how you're raising this child, But, I think the key is to stay true to who you are, because eventually, at some point, it's going to come out, and you're going to need to channel it in a healthy way. And when I got to university, I took geography as a major, and I also majored in ecology. I had honestly played around with the idea of doing geology, but I think it worked out better that I, did ecology and geography. And the combination of the two, I would say, has allowed me to think about systems and ecology and the world in a much deeper capacity than someone who had just specialized in one field. And yes. I can say this because some of my friends that just majored in two like zoology and ecology, you just you were just exposed to concepts of, specific animal taxonomic groups, evolution, but it became very specific. Whereas in geography, I was exposed to things like understanding how climate and policy play a role in the way that we make decisions. How geography from an ecological perspective plays a role from a human perspective. And so many of these things have honestly been the most beneficial to me now when I'm thinking about creating ideas and concepts to work in my career at the moment. So I think at in my second year, we did a marine and coastal ecology field trip, which was led by my supervisor now. So it was really interesting because my supervisor now, he's been around at my university for a long time, and he gave us our first lecture on herps in my first year of ecology. And I remember then thinking, wow, like it's so cool. I just want to keep learning about that. But even then, I never had that that courage, I would say, to think about pursuing a career in herpetology. And then from then on, I did a couple of different courses, field courses in ecology, and learned about the different animals that live in our environment. And we would go looking for things like snakes and frogs, and it was fascinating. I think that's when I had a real feel for moving into something where I could interact with animals as a career. And from there on, for my honors, I decided that I was going to go the ecology route rather than the geography route. And by that point, I think my geography kind of had, I guess my interest had changed, especially on the climate side. It sounds really crazy now, but honestly, it was the math and the physics that make it so dense. And then, as a climatologist, really you're spending your time behind a computer doing modeling and that sort of thing. So that's when you really get an idea of, okay, this is completely different to what I had expected and wanted to do.
Yeah, storm chasing is not on the typical climatologist's manifesto.
And I remember, again, coming back to my supervisor, and he taught a course on biogeography. And honestly, I think this was also one of the biggest, this had the biggest impact on my life. Because now I'm learning about, concepts that I've never even heard of. Thinking about the way things were and how they have become, the way species have changed, evolved into a completely different environment. I think this stuff completely blew my mind.
I also find that biogeography was something that, when I did my bachelor's, I did a bachelor's in zoology, and it was really strictly zoology and evolutionary biology, basically. And the concept of biogeography was missing to such an extent that now I've had to teach myself all of these biogeographic concepts and things. And some of it I didn't really realize until reading the book, the biography of Alexander von Humboldt, who had constructed these incredible comparisons across all of the world's mountains and things, or many of the world's mountains, in order to sort of compare biogeographic composition and how these consistent laws across different environments. And some of that stuff I really resent having missed out on from having gone too much into the animals. Like you were saying, it's such an important concept when we're trying to understand, especially evolution of organisms. Gabriel, I can imagine that also from paleontological point of view, if you don't understand the biogeography of the organisms.
Yeah, but I was thinking when you guys were discussing that I'm a big fan of biogeography, and I think it's amazingly important. But I think not so much recently, but I remember about a decade ago, it's not on the main, like a lot of herpetologists are sometimes ignorant on the subject. There are a lot of papers that would benefit from a better understanding of biogeography. And a lot of times it's either overlooked or taken very lightly. And it used to drive me crazy. And I think it's less apparent now. But it used to be the case around 10 years ago. And it was like, and it's because it drives me crazy when people don't understand how environments are distributed, and then human frontiers are taken into consideration without taking into not understanding what a real environment, how it's distributed and how it was distributed in the past. Like in the late Pleistocene, for example, how forests were expanded and then they retrieve, and then all the forest refugia and all that, and so a lot of I think it's a much better place now. But it yes, what you said, Mark, is true. It should be more and more prevalent, and I think that's why this discussion is so important.
Yeah, and I think 10 years ago things were very different. What we were allowed to do or think about doing as a career option, in terms of mentorship, in terms of that ability to have someone or something to go to understand that you can be yourself and pursue a career that's going to make you happy, that didn't exist. And I have to be honest, I growing up, I wasn't really the academically inclined. My sister got the good grades. She was the star buff of the family, which again made me kind of the black sheep, right? And I think it channeled through into university. I think when I was learning about these courses, I was very fascinated from like an activity, like a doing point of view, but the theoretical side was always quite challenging, right? Like honestly, writing exams is not for everyone, and I think this has a lot to do with how I feel about doing education now. I think a lot of us that are actually in the academic world now didn't necessarily have the means to explore different learning styles. We just kind of had to do, right? You just read your book, read your notes, and wrote that exam. You either passed or you kind of did really well, and a mix between the two. And I think what's important that I learned coming out of it was how I retained that knowledge. Because honestly, I can tell you now that there are concepts that I learned in my second year evolution class, and I can specifically remember sitting in that evolution class that I can remember, but my friends that were in the same class don't necessarily remember because they are better at kind of the book reading, book learning method of education. And yeah, so I think there were a lot of different things along the way that had sparked my interest in learning more about reptiles. And again, it was still about pursuing a career that was going to give me a job. And I think when you're also, growing up in South Africa, there's a lot of pressure to get a job that pays after you finish university, after you finish your honors. It's not you're not likely to pursue a master's or a PhD. And so I never honestly thought that I would be doing a PhD one day, because it was never appealing to me in the way that it was portrayed. Let me put it that way. We had teaching assistants that would tell us about this cool research that they were doing, but honestly, from the herb side, it was never something that I felt like, oh, okay, like I could do this and then still get a job one day. And at some point, I think I just kind of let that go. I think so. For my honors, I did want to work with reptiles, but then opted for a project that was supposed to be on climate change and the striped mice. Long story short, did not end up doing that project and did something on completely different. And then, then when I decided I wanted to do a master's, then I knew I wanted to work with reptiles. But even then, so that's...
Sorry, did you know that, or was it clear by that time that you already wanted to do herps, even when you were dancing around with the idea of doing these striped mice things?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I did a course in my honors, during my honors, on, gosh, I can't remember, but it was something to do with physiology and obviously my supervisor now taught the course, and we learned, in our honors degree, we use the method of like each student finding a paper and then reading through the paper, discussing what they found right, what they found wrong. Obviously it was very herb focused. And that was, I think, the point where I knew, okay, like, I want to do more research on herbs, because they're just fascinating. And something I didn't mention is that I was still also Zimbabwean at the time. And so it was going to be very difficult to find a job anyways. And that's also kind of where the pressure to get a job came from, because otherwise I was going to be stuck in this research academic world. And, everyone knows you don't really get paid well in academia. So, there were a lot of things playing around in my head. And when I decided to do a master's in herbs or with snakes specifically, my family, so my parents kind of were okay with it, but my uncle and my aunt, who were in South Africa, and we were kind of here almost because of them. So my uncle is an engineer, and my aunt's a chartered accountant. They were both working in these big companies in South Africa. So it was kind of like this notion where, okay, they know what they're talking about. So you listen to what they're saying. And they kind of, they were really the ones that said, okay, no, this isn't really the right route to go. You're going to be stuck working with snakes, and then what? There's no career, right? And you kind of, behind, not to their face, but, it's like, but I just want to work with snakes. Like, let me work with snakes.
Yeah.
Well, but it's also
That's
coming
when
from
know
people.
that you have the passion, right?
But it probably also comes from people that I always think, when people are not really connected to nature, sometimes it's difficult for them to understand those things.
Yeah, very much so. And I think as much as a lot of people, and I think it's not specific to any racial group or specific part of the world. I think for generations now we've had that pressure to, get to be in a career where you can have that family life, and something stable. So when you eventually become a pensioner, you don't have to depend on anybody else. And that it's such a negative and like it's a negative mindset, because it limits. I think the word is it's a very limiting mindset, because now it stops you from exploring different options. And sure, you might, like my family, we would go to different nature reserves. We'd go on safaris and sorts of things where you are exposed to wildlife, so you are interested in it. And I think we're very lucky in Africa, where we can honestly go an hour away and you can be in the bush. But it's not something for a lot of people that can be translated into a way that is going to put food on the table. So it took I think a lot of hard work on my side to stick to my gut and say, okay, no, I do want to work with snakes. And I honestly didn't really have a project in mind when I was doing my master's. And so when I spoke to my supervisor, he had this cool idea about looking at diet and evolution in a family called the Lamprophiidae. And I'm sure you want me to talk a little bit more about that research.
Yeah. So, I mean, you finally had you just had the results from that published, right?
Yes.
Published in the Journal of Herpetology in, when was it? February?
January. Yeah.
Yeah. So the paper is titled "Ancestral Reconstruction of Diet and Fang Condition in the Lamprophiidae: Implications for the Evolution of Venom Systems in Snakes." So your supervisor is Graham?
Yes.
Graham Alexander, and so you got onto this project that he was tossing around and decided to look at, I don't know, some of the most interesting snakes in the world, which is really cool.
Well, but I was going to say, coming from somebody that works and deals with neotropical herpetology mostly, explain to us, Hiral, what Lamprophiidae are. Like, give us like an idea what Lamprophiidae are, because I'm not super familiar with them.
You can tell us what Lamprophiidae were and what they are now as a result of nomenclatural changes.
Yes.
Oh, the joys. Okay, so Lamprophiidae, which I obviously didn't know at the time, like the intricacies of it really, but I knew them as most of the non-venomous snakes that we have in Africa. So things like your house snakes, your sort of sand snakes, a lot of the non-venomous or traditionally non-venomous snakes. And for the listeners, house snakes are, as the name suggests, house snakes that are around almost on a regular basis. And people will often find these snakes and believe that they're dangerous, and it goes for the same for most of the other Lamprophiidae. And it's quite interesting that coming from someone that wasn't necessarily well versed with the taxonomy, especially from the herpetological side. I just thought, okay, these were just cool animals cool snake, a snake group that has honestly been neglected for a really long time. They're pretty difficult to find, or for the most part, you find a couple of species quite regularly. But I think that played a huge role in why nobody's really spent a lot of time investigating them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as a group, it's worth mentioning that Lamprophiidae were formerly within the Colubridae, which is at the time was basically exclusively based on morphology and was a waste bin taxon.
Yes, and it was the thing that it was distributed worldwide, and it was
yes. There were things called coluber in I think 3 different continents, and now of course the Lamprophiids are split off, and it turns out evolutionarily that the Lamprophiids are, well, the nomenclature is in a state of flux right now. So we are talking about Lamprophiids in the broad sensu lato, because formerly Lamprophiids were divided into a series of subfamilies, which included the Samophinae, the Pseudoxyrophines from Madagascar, but also you had the Atractaspins, so they're the stiletto snakes, right?
Stiletto snakes,
Yeah.
which are crazy.
And all of these different groups, which are now in the very latest version of the taxonomy, are now treated as separate families. So they were all elevated up one level for reasons that I don't fully understand, but whatever. People are trying to make consistencies across the tree, which is not so easy. But in any case, what we're talking about right now is the broad sense Lamprophiids, which includes those different subgroups, right? And they are, as a group, very diverse. I am very familiar with the Malagasy species, which are in the Pseudoxyrophiidae now, but formerly in the Pseudoxyrophiinae of the Lamprophiidae. And yeah, they vary from extremely common snakes that you see most days to extremely rare species that are only known from single individuals. And within Madagascar, the Pseudoxyrophiids occupy a huge range of different niches. But that, at least from my perspective, which is slightly biased, potentially reflects this sort of island radiation that we have in the Pseudoxyrophiids in comparison to what I suppose are largely conserved species within the other subfamilies of the Lamprophiidae, right? I mean, the Samophines are moderately samey, right? Of course, there's big differences between the different subfamilies. Like the stiletto snakes are extremely divergent, especially in terms of their dentition, from all of the other snakes, but or from all of the other Lamprophiids, rather. But within the group, I think the Pseudoxyrophiids are the most diverse, right?
Yeah, and it's so I would say it was a huge challenge to get data on the diet, as one can imagine. I think for most snakes around the world, we don't really have good data on diet for snakes.
Right.
Unless you cut up museum specimens, which I didn't end up doing, you don't necessarily get that accurate data. And honestly, with so many Lamprophiids, they're really small. Like I mentioned, they're difficult to find. So you're not going to find them in museum specimens anyways. So it's all based on, literature, whatever literature is available, a lot of field guides, and a lot of observations that were found by people like 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. And especially with the Madagascar snakes, honestly, I relied a lot on Mark's lovely blog to get some data. And it was a challenge. But I think there's probably additional observations that I obviously couldn't complete at the time. A lot of because I know a lot of research on the snakes in Madagascar has honestly been done after I finished my master's. And to have incorporated that into the data set, I think would have been really interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, the Malagasy snakes are actually going to be worthy of their own investigations, and I think they'll be an interesting perspective. But so one of the key questions that you were trying to answer was basically, were these species ancestrally venomous, right? And did they ancestrally have fangs? And what were the fangs at the front or the back?
Back-fanged.
Yeah.
So yes, that was a very interesting conclusion that we came to, because, considering that traditionally most of these species are supposed to be fangless, we didn't expect that the ancestral condition was going to be back-fanged.
Rear-fanged, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess the question is, what do you think? So those species that are rear-fanged, I guess they should be having other kinds of morphological correlates with being rear-fanged, right? Because you're not typically using back fangs in order to defend yourself, per se, unless you're a boomslang.
No.
And even then, it only works a day later, so it's
Well,
Yeah.
there are a lot of rear fang snakes that are, very venomous. But,
yes, very dangerous. Yeah.
But my question for you here, Al, is I would like, so the ancestral form of Lamprophiids was rear fang, right? So what were the evolutionary pressures you think that that made this huge radiation of snakes lose some of that?
So, that's why the big focus was on diet. So most of your herp listeners should know that the primary reason why snakes have venom or have evolved venom is to immobilize prey and eat that prey. And that's why this paper or this research itself was just so interesting, because it proved exactly that. It proved exactly the fact that there's this variation in diet is what is actually causing this morphologically diverse dentition in these different snakes. And there's specific groups in the paper that you'll see that completely stand out in terms of that. And just to pick out a few, I'll tell you, for one, the mole snakes. It's Pseudaspis carna. It is a really interesting snake because, again, it's not venomous, but they've got these teeth that are basically, they cause a lot of lacerations, and that can only really be for diet, their diet on things like moles, and the fossorial lifestyle that it has. And so it became very obvious that what has happened within the family is these independent evolutions of having rear fangs or losing the ability to have any kind of fangs.
Yeah.
Based on diet, yeah.
Is there a dietary explanation for what happened to the stiletto snakes? Because they are exceptional, right?
Well,
for
let's explain
those
again
who don't know,
Yes, exactly.
stiletto snakes are the only snakes that can envenomate you without opening their mouths. They are extremely dangerous to pick up.
And extremely
because-
fast. They strike at a ridiculously fast.
Yes, that's true. They like uncoil and strike and then coil back up again, right? But they are most famous for the fact that you cannot use the typical, or I don't know if most famous, but they're well known for the fact that you cannot use the typical snake grip, where you put one finger on top of the head and two fingers around the jaws, because you'll still get envenomated, and it is not fun.
Yeah.
So, but that's a group that I've always found fascinating, because that doesn't look like a dietary adaptation, right? That must just be defensive.
No, it's actually their lifestyle. So they're fossorial. It's a combination. They do have quite a generalistic diet. So they are basically these snakes that do come out after some good rains when the soil is a bit wet. That's often when people will encounter them. But because they spend much of their lifestyle underground, they've obviously had to adapt to both being able to utilize or take advantage of whatever prey is available, and utilizing the specific dentition. And if I'm being completely honest, I think there's still a lot more that could be done with that group, because let's be honest, I think we still know very, very little about what's really going on. My colleagues and I often joke that if we could have an endoscope that could just stick in burrows everywhere, we'd learn so much more about snakes like this.
Yes. I've thought about that often because we were also I've studied a few of the different typhlops on Madagascar, and being able to find out what the typhlops are up to would be super interesting. And we just have no idea for the most part. We mostly see them when it's raining and they come out of the soil.
Yeah.
So it's a very cool paper. It's available through your website, and readers can go and have a look at it and read up. I'm really curious to start to see these kinds of things at an even bigger perspective and understanding, because there's so much convergent evolution as well that's going on here. I mean, the snail-eating snakes, we haven't talked about at all, but they are also super fascinating, and the different groups of snail-eating snakes across the world that have converged on the same kind of jaw mechanisms are just bizarre. And so, I mean, very interesting work and definitely worth checking out. How about you tell us what you're up to now? So this is basically, this is fresh, but it's not exactly what you're working on anymore, right?
Yeah. So that was from my master's work, which I finished in 2017. So that just goes to show you about how the peer review system works and how it took, almost 3 years to publish.
Yes. Goodness.
So, I mean, long story short, I knew I didn't really want to go into a PhD straight after, for the simple reason that I didn't really want to get caught up in a lot of the academic pressures. So I, changed things up a little bit, because I was also still Zimbabwean, had a year of just volunteering, working with different organizations that were working on various different animals. And then I came across this organization called Save the Snakes. It's American-based, and they needed a volunteer to work on their social media. And so I contacted them. This was obviously a volunteer opportunity, but I took it because it was the best thing I could get that was closest to working with reptiles. And then so that was about 3 years ago, almost 2 years ago, 2018. In the interim, I ended up actually getting a job at BirdLife South Africa. So for a lot of the listeners, BirdLife South Africa is a kind of a branch of BirdLife International, and they do some really great conservation work. So for me, being a part of an organization like that honestly taught me a lot in terms of the application of a lot of science. Sure, it was focused on birds, but it gave me a lot of really great ideas about and concepts that I could then apply, that I knew I wanted to apply to snakes.
Still reptiles.
Yeah, right? That was a joke. So it was really cool because, honestly, working for a bird organization, it became very clear in the very beginning I was very passionate about snakes. So it was also very cool that people would share with me pictures of different birds eating the snakes around.
Super useful data.
Nuts. Yeah. And it was really cool to see because there were some really interesting observations that, again, nobody's really looked at the predator-prey dynamic from that side, from birds and snakes, and other reptiles, in fact. And so these kinds of things started to play on my mind. And BirdLife South Africa is also made up of so one of one of my colleagues there actually used to be my teaching assistant at my university.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew her. So she came from the science background, and I think that helped in thinking about how science can be applied to conservation. And I think since I was younger, I think that impact of wanting to do something bigger, something more than myself, was always there. And I think this was when it finally started to feel like I could do something of the sort.
Mm-hmm.
I was still volunteering with Save the Snakes, and so what I didn't mention is that when I was in my second year of my master's, I had the opportunity to go to the World Congress of Herpetology, which was in China that year. And so having been to one World Congress already, I knew that I wanted to go to the next one. And so while I was still working at BirdLife South Africa in the end of 2019, I made a plan to go to the World Congress of Herpetology in New Zealand, which was in New Zealand at the beginning of 2020, where I, of course, met Mark and some other really cool herpetologists. I'm going to give a quick shout out to the Herp Rangers because
Yes.
I can.
Yeah.
And that reignited my, I guess, interest in wanting to do a bit more applied work with herps and with snakes. So I had been thinking about wanting to do a PhD, and in fact, I'm sure this is going to be beneficial to a lot of people that always get, feel like they get shut down. I had applied to do a PhD in Australia. Long story short, I got into the PhD, but I didn't get the funding. And it seemed like that year, most people, didn't really have much funding anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it ended up working out for the better, because I think it would have been, with COVID last year, I think it would have been a struggle to try and manage everything.
Yeah.
And so then I came back to South Africa after the World Congress, and I knew I wanted to change things up. And I had, so some of my friends some of my herp friends in South Africa had just taken over this really cool reptile park in South Africa. And they were looking for some really cool partnerships. And that's where I started to think about ideas of creating a very cool project focusing on education and conservation.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I spoke to my friends, and we kind of created this project, which I'll speak about just in a minute. And in conjunction with that, I also knew that I wanted to do my PhD. And so I started my PhD at the beginning of this year. And because a lot of education and conservation around snakes at the moment is around snake bite, it just seems fitting that my PhD also focuses on understanding venomous snakes in relation to snake bite.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's exciting for me now to finally be in a place where I'm doing exactly what I want to do, especially in terms of the PhD, because a lot of people get caught up into doing projects that they don't necessarily want to do, and you might feel the pressure. I do think it was really great that I took that break, because I feel much more ready to take on a PhD now than I would have felt a couple of years ago.
Of course, yeah.
So yeah, it's really exciting. I'm currently writing my proposal. I have about 2 months to submit a proposal to hopefully eventually become a PhD candidate. It's really, really exciting to learn about venomous snakes. Also, having done my master's on diet and venom evolution, there's a lot of synergies between
Right.
the ideas that I got, the impact of diet and venom. I do hope to look at some of those things. Currently, my project very much looks at behavioral aspects in terms of defensive striking, and I'm hoping to do a large-scale assessment of snakebite in South Africa.
That would be so useful. Whenever I've heard about big snakebite studies, they've almost exclusively been based in India, where of course snakebite kills, I think it's hundreds of thousands of people a year, because of Russell's vipers that live on the verges between rice paddies, and they're extremely dangerous snakes. So I mean, it really would be valuable to have that perspective from Southern Africa as well.
Yeah, so it's very interesting because in South Africa, snakebite is not as much of a problem as it is in Central Africa, or even in places like Zimbabwe and Botswana. One of the obvious reasons is because we have better healthcare that we can provide. But what I'm hoping to do is understand where there are flaws, where cases are not going reported, and also how our understanding of species or the behavior of some of these species in South Africa can help us in the rest of Africa, because you find a lot of these species in the rest of Africa as well. And that's the main question. For a long time, when it came to snakebite, a big focus was creating antivenoms, understanding venom variation, not necessarily the ecology side of things. And I think that's kind of where the shift is going, very much globally, but it really excites me to be able to explore these different options during my PhD.
Yeah, fantastic. So I have one last question before we wrap up, and that is, if you could give a message to young people like you, both growing up in Africa who might not have access to the resources that people in the US or in Europe might have, and to people who I guess are fascinated by these things, what would you tell them?
So I'm gonna give two messages, for the simple reason that you get people that are interested in working with herbs. And I'm very excited that when one of the schools that we visited recently, it was a girl that listened to our talk and said, okay, how do I become what you are? And honestly, I told her, there's different career options that you can take. Go to university, pursue zoology, and in the meantime, keep learning about reptiles. Go to your snake park. There are people there that are willing to help you, willing to advise you about different options. Even when it comes to reptiles, there's such a huge diversity. So seek that help. I think that help is a lot more available now than it was when we were much younger. And then to the ones that are kind of in between and still have a fear of snakes, again, go to your reptile park or museum, or get out there in terms of learning about wildlife and reptiles specifically. They are such a fascinating group of animals, and there's so much to and they have so much to offer. One of the biggest reasons why I love reptiles is that they're really such a resilient group. You can find them anywhere. They're honestly doing the coolest thing in the environment. You can watch a snake trying to feed on a gecko, but you can find that same gecko trying to feed on that snake. How cool is that, right? So I think it's important to explore options. There are so many. There are books available. Read. It makes a huge difference. And hopefully, I think I can announce this now. I am also working on a book with about 50 other women from around the world. It's a Women in Herpetology book that focuses on our stories, and how we grew up, how we got into herpetology, and it'll come out at some point. I'm still busy working on it, but
I'm so excited about this.
Yeah.
It's extremely necessary too. I think that's extremely necessary too. We need more women in herpetology and in all sciences in general.
Yeah.
And
it's important to hear the diversity of stories behind the people, because it's one thing to say, we need more women in herpetology, but it's not always so clear how to make that happen, and how. This is why I asked you these provocative, make a statement to the people questions, because I think it's important that people understand that you don't have to have a specific background in order to, my background has been extremely different from your background, and Gabriel's background, and Ethan's background, and all of these things, and that those differences in background are still allowing us to, we're still pursuing the same sort of goals, and you can still make a lot with a very different background.
Yeah, but I think that it's important for particularly for women to understand that it is to have role models to look at, to have other herpetologists role models to look at, because it drives me crazy when I do when you look at your audience in your social media. It always drives me crazy that I'm a scientific illustrator. I'm always posting about reptiles and amphibians and animals and dinosaurs and extinct fauna. 80% of my following is male, and it drives me insane. I would like to see a bigger chunk of a female audience, and I know because I've talked to other science communicators that it's a similar experience that they have. So it's important for women, I think, to have role models to look at and say, yes, I can do this that I want to do. Even though society might not be telling me that, I can do that,
Yeah. And, just on that point, I think it's important that, so for me personally, I think social media plays a huge role in the content that you have. If you're following herpetologists on Twitter, if you have herpetology focused content on Facebook and Instagram, it's going to be a huge motivation in terms of learning more about herps around the world. Even as a herpetologist based in South Africa, it's always fascinating to learn about what other herpetologists are doing around the world. And yes, I think it's important that women often, women relate to women more, quite naturally. I also think that there needs to be a shift in the way that we showcase the fact that men and women in herpetology work together. We can work together. And we work in the field together all the time, yet that's not necessarily portrayed as much as it should. And it's one of the things I'm hoping to kind of change as well. So my colleague and I that are working on the snake and education project, he's a white male, I'm a female of color. That dynamic changes a lot of the way we're portraying our project, because now we're showing a partnership between what might in the past not have been likely or not have been very popular. But we need to show that we go beyond color and gender and all these different things, because at the end of the day, we all work towards our passion for herps.
Absolutely. What a great thing to end on. Thank you so much, Hiral, for being on the show. And with that, thank you all for listening. This has been the SquaMates podcast. Gabriel, where can one find you on the internet?
I am at SerpentIllus on Instagram and on Twitter. and Gabriel Ugueto Art on Facebook, and my website is gabrielugueto.com.
And Ethan, where can one find you?
I am at Black Mud Puppy almost everywhere social media wise, and my website is ethankozak.com.
And Hiral, where can one find you?
I am at Hiral Naik 25 on Twitter, at Hiral's Hive on Instagram, Hiral Naik on Facebook, and hiralnaik.wordpress.com.
Excellent. You can find me at Markshirts, MarkScherz, on Twitter, on Instagram, and at MDShirts on Facebook. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at SquaMatesPod, on Instagram at SquaMatesPod, on Facebook at SquaMatesPod, on all the different things at SquaMatesPod. You can contact us by writing to SquaMatesPod@gmail.com or @ing us on Twitter. You can also leave us a review on
Yes,
iTunes
do.
or other places. We love your reviews, especially not so much when they're not so nice, but you know, we get on with it. And yeah, do let us know what you like, what you don't like, and what your thoughts are on all of the things that we talk about. And as we like to say on the show,
Let's